left-wing lunatics completely lose it, bashing the monarch's legacy. It seems that in this brave new woke world, the left doesn't even have the good grace and manners to pay respect to a most remarkable woman who was as close to universally admired as one can get. To discuss this, let's cross to London again and talk with Spiked's online chief political writer, Brendan O'Neill. Brendan, some of the reaction from the extreme left, as I call them, has been just shocking. We'll look at the Australian Greens in a second, but here's an example from an American professor and also an anti-racist teacher. Her name is Uju Anya, and she tweeted this: I heard the chief monarch of a thieving, raping, genocidal empire is finally dying. May her pain be excruciating. And she had other similarly disturbing tweets. Brendan, this was so repugnant that the university, Carnegie Mellon University, where she's an academic, released a statement, but this is not some tiny university. This university is more expensive than Harvard. You pay $58,000 US a year for tuition there. You would think far left indoctrination would be a lot cheaper.
I mean, that tweet, all of the tweets I've seen have just been repugnant, absolutely disgusting. And that tweet you've just shown there, firstly, it is just completely and utterly ignorant. The British Empire does not exist. It hasn't existed for a long time. And in fact, one of the Queen's signal achievements was overseeing the dismantling of the British Empire and the transformation of the empire into the Commonwealth, which is not an imperial institution, and the end of the Britain's old relationship with the world as it existed prior to the Queen coming to the throne. So just utter stupidity on display there. And also, it's a powerful reminder that, you know, the idea that the woke set are the nice ones, the kind ones, the ones who respect humanity, that has been completely thrown into question by these kinds of tweets. If you are wishing excruciating pain on a 96-year-old woman as she takes her last gasps, then you are the scum of the earth, in my view.
Oh, absolutely. And the statement from the university talking about academic freedom, and these are the same universities that if anyone is even slightly conservative, they're cancelled and bullied out of their roles. But this is allowed because it's apparently academic freedom. Now, let me show you what Greens leader here in Australia, Adam Bandt, had to say barely 6 hours after Her Majesty's passing. He wrote, "Rest in peace, Queen Elizabeth II. Our thoughts are with her family and all who loved her. Now Australia must move forward. We need treaty with First Nations people and we need to become a republic." And this from another Green, this time Senator Mehreen Faruqi. She wrote, "Condolences to those who knew the Queen. I cannot mourn the leader of a racist empire built on stolen lives, land and wealth of colonised peoples. We are reminded of the urgency of treaty with First Nations, justice and reparations for British colonies and becoming a republic." I mean, Brendan, what's your response to that? You can always count on the intellectual vacuousness of the Greens here in Australia.
I mean, the Greens in Australia, they make the Greens in the UK look intelligent in comparison. Again, once again, there is that ignorance on display. You know, the Queen was not the head of an empire. That was the whole point of the Queen, that she didn't do that anymore. That was the end of, you know, these people, all they need to do is watch The Crown. If they can't be bothered to read a book of history, they could at least watch The Crown on Netflix and learn something from that. So the ignorance on display and the rush with which people have used the death of the monarch, the death of the Queen, to try and push their own agenda, I think there's something unsavoury about that. You know, give it some time. Of course, there are lots of discussions to be had about what happens to Britain now, whether King Charles will be a good king. I have my doubts about that. And whether we should remain a monarchy or become a republic, those are all questions that are legitimate. But give people a bit of time to grieve the passing of a woman who's been reigning for 70 years, who means a great deal, firstly to her family, but also to this nation and many other nations. Let's have a bit of breathing space before they rush in with their vulgar comments or their politicised agendas.
And talking about vulgar and also just being historically ignorant is another one from a comment from an American journalist, Jamel Hill, who said this about the Queen. She wrote, "Journalists are tasked with putting legacies into full context, so it is entirely appropriate to examine the Queen and her role in the devastating impact of continued colonialism." As you've explained, again, the ignorance of that tweet is remarkable. One, she doesn't set foreign policy, and during her 70-year reign, there was decolonisation. But the New York Times also had a go. They're always can be relied on to get it wrong. They posted this from a Harvard professor of history who wrote, "We should not romanticise her era. The Queen helped obscure a bloody history of decolonisation whose proportions and legacies have yet to be adequately acknowledged." Oh, Brendan, really, what is wrong with these people?
I think that a large part of it is actual stupidity, to be frank, because another thing about the Queen, they don't understand world history, but they also don't understand British history. We have the Queen was a ceremonial monarch. This is a constitutional monarchy, of course. The idea that, as you say, that she sets foreign policy or that she represents political agendas, it's simply untrue. We fought in this country 350 years ago precisely to have a monarch who would play a more decorative role and would not be involved in politics. And the great achievement of the Queen over the past 70 years, which is really worth admiring, is that she played that role to perfection. She held her counsel. She didn't express her political views. She didn't express her emotions, even though there was often pressure on her to do so by the therapeutic new elites. She kept her private life separate from her public role. She did it really well. I'm not convinced future monarchs will be able to do it as well as she did. So these people are wrong. They are being really horrible about an old lady who has just died. And I really wish they would take one lesson from the Queen, which is sometimes hold your counsel, bite your lip. You don't have to say everything that's on your mind.
That's it. She did speak about restraint, just a little bit of restraint at a time like this. Now, let's look at some of the more positive tweets. Let's have a couple of good ones after that horrible lineup we showed you. Let's go to the Rolling Stones' Mick Jagger, who tweeted, "For my whole life, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has always been there. In my childhood, I can recall watching her wedding highlights on TV. I remember her as a beautiful young lady to the much beloved grandmother of the nation. My deepest sympathies are with the royal family." I think Mick just summed it up beautifully there. And let's hear also from Donald Trump, who released a statement. He was a massive fan of the Queen, as was his mother. It was a lengthy statement, but it ended with this. "May God bless the Queen. May she reign forever in our hearts, and may God hold her and Prince Philip in abiding care." Now, that's more like it, isn't it, Brendan?
Absolutely. I thought Boris Johnson's statement was word perfect. It reminds you what a great writer he was, and he captured the mood of the nation better than Liz Truss, I have to say, although Liz Truss did a good job of it too. But I think that's important. What is important about the Queen for this nation is that she was the tie with history. She was the woman who connected us with the past, who connected us with each other. And I'm worried about what does come next now that the Queen has gone, because she was really the last part of the establishment that respected British history, that didn't want to undo history and rip down statues and rename buildings. She had a respect for history, a respect for tradition, and a respect for emotions and virtues like stoicism and forbearance. And that really cut against the grain of our narcissistic, often quite hysterical era. So we are going to miss the Queen. I think when we lose the Queen, we've lost more than the Queen. We've lost that connection with the past. And I think people will feel that very strongly in the weeks and months to come.
Well said, Brendan O'Neill. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.